Hello, everyone who's here early. We officially start in 4 minutes, so this is, checkup time and everything, getting everything settled. Uh, so I'll show you my surroundings. I'm here in my outdoor office. This is where I live, and I'll show you my surroundings and a little bit of what we've got set up here to show and talk about. Um, We're just coming out of quarantine here in Peru, so it is just now possible to travel around a little bit. Today is actually the day that interprovincial travel resumes as a possibility. So there's a lot of frenzy with all of that. For the most part, my household is still keeping it pretty low key. We're not doing a whole lot of going lots of places, but we are going to go up the canyon near where we live later this week and again next week and start talking about some of the sustainable tourism things that we're working on. But right now, we're just hanging out at my house, and it is afternoon here in Ollantaytambo, which is the time of day when a wind kicks up from up in the canyon that I'll show you in just a moment. We'll turn around, we'll switch the camera focus. So you can see there's a canyon in between those mountains up there, I hope. And, up there back behind where the face is. The face is the Tunda. He is one of the sacred protector spirits of the town of Ollantaytambo here where I live. Anyway, up that canyon, there are a number of really remarkable weaving communities, and throughout the course of the sustainable tourism and virtual tourism things that I'm going to be doing over the next, however long it is until in-person tourism can start up again. We're going to be going up that way and talking to a bunch of folks. So here is El Canchon, my home. My office here is next to the laundry facilities, the laundry drying facilities. And it's a nice garden. And here we have the cat who is hanging out on a textile. This is Manuel, who works with me. This is his poncho, and we're going to do some real looking at this and talking about some of the interesting questions that folks have asked on the Patreon and all that kind of thing. Oh yeah, predictably, the cat is sitting on the garment. So take a close look at what we're looking at here. In case it is not obvious, these are some pretty eye-popping neon synthetic yarns. This, by contrast, is hand-spun, naturally dyed, and they're woven with the same techniques. Miski would say hi if she were not studiously ignoring us, as is a cat's prerogative, right? Some of the folks who are on here have been here to El Canchon and have met the cat and gotten to sit around this table and all that kind of thing. Well, anyway, so what happened to kick off and make me decide that this live stream would be fun to do today is yesterday, Yelly Knits, Yelly on Instagram posted something where she was talking about a pattern that she saw that she really liked, and she was interested in buying the kit to make it with the yarn that it was made in. But she went to go do that and looked at what it was going to cost to buy the kit of all the yarns for that project in the size that she wanted to make for herself, and it was going to cost $376 before shipping. So she decided she wasn't going to buy that kit after all. And so she expressed some frustration at the fact that a lot of the time patterns that get published showcase really expensive yarns. And that's true, and there are a number of reasons for that, and we're gonna talk more about that probably in some more live streams and more episodes and more conversations. But I thought it would be kind of interesting to start this whole discussion off by talking about traditional textiles here in the Andes of Peru, where I live and where I grew up, with my parents who were doing research and sustainability work later with traditional Andean textiles. And so I grew up spinning and weaving in the traditional Andean ways, which were really threatened at that point. And I think you could argue that they're still at risk, but they're less at risk in a lot of ways now. So a lot of the work that my parents did and colleagues of theirs did was working on getting those traditional methods and techniques back in play, right, and widespread, and to have them be less at risk of being lost. And that included being able to make textiles with hand-spun yarns and naturally dyed fibers and all of that kind of thing, and from the natural fibers that everybody has around here all the time. But which were fallen by the wayside for a number of reasons. And one of the big reasons was that if people were producing textiles for sale, you would have you would have to produce to the market demand, right? And so what people were finding was that tourists were motivated by bright colors more than they were motivated by the absolute quality of the textile, right? So they maybe didn't know how to judge even if something was an exceptionally good textile. And some natural dyes in colors that maybe weren't astoundingly vibrant but were still nice colors would, a much more technical piece, a lot more labor involved in it, and it would not sell as fast or potentially command the price of a brightly colored synthetic textile. So if you're producing to sell, then to an extent you need to produce what moves, right? So this was decades of work for my parents and numerous of their colleagues and our family and friends to shift market forces to make there be more viable markets based on education and creating demand for truly authentic, hand-spun, naturally dyed textiles and that sort of thing, right? But that isn't necessarily every single weaving community in even just the Cusco area of Peru, right? So there's all of that. And then there's the question of what people are making for their own personal use, right? What is useful in those contexts? And there are a few different things going on there. And as I am saying this, I realize I left my notebook with notes. So here, have a quick moment of looking at the garden. My apologies. That's the thrills in doing stuff live sometimes. Okay, so I'm back, and I have some notes that we're going to talk about here. They're quick pointers for me to refer back to. So, yeah. So the question is for use, for what people are going to use for themselves, right? What's good enough? What matters? What do you want to do? What do you want to do when it comes to to making yarn choices for your own personal project, right? What are the factors? Well, so raise your hands if, as a knitter, crocheter, weaver, so on, you've ever felt like somebody was judging you for what yarn you chose to use. I know, right? I can't see you raising your hands, but I'm betting that there are a bunch of hands raised here. So there's a bunch of things going on with that. And a lot to say. So, color motivates a lot of us, right? I mean, if we're into yarn and fiber and fabrics and textures and all that kind of thing, there's a chance we might be interested in color also. And I don't know if you can hear my nephew over in the other part of the courtyard singing, getting ready to maybe play a little football. Not USA hand egg, but the one with the black and white round ball that you don't touch with your hands while you're playing. Anyway, getting around, doing some chores, and getting ready to do a little bit of post meal activity. Right. So yeah, color. It's a big motivator. Fern Monkey says, I remember someone saying that it pained her that that she had. Come on, show me the thing. That she had knitted a beautiful cabled sweater. That she had knitted a beautiful cabled sweater from acrylic yarn, and you know, right. So, how many hours of work went into that, right? Why would you knit something from acrylic? Why would you ever do that, right? Well, why would somebody make this absolutely staggering poncho that a cat is lying on from acrylic yarn, right? Why would why would you do it? Why would you include, llamas and a cat and revolutionary leader Tupac Amaru and uh, and flags and and this is a church, and why would you do that, right? Why would you do all this amazing stuff using these low rent and considered crummy yarns? Okay, well, all right, I'm gonna say a word that we try to not say out loud too often, and that's the M word, 4 letters. The scourge shall not be named. So a lot of the time, that's consideration. Another is like Kay just said, she has 4 kids. Anything she can't throw in the washer is of limited use, right? That's not to say you maybe don't want to do it, but you're making use textiles, and so this had better be some really durable stuff. Kat just said, "Well, it's what's available, right? You have it." So yeah, that factor right there made us all really stoked when my niece went out with a rare go to the next town overpass during quarantine, and she came back with a couple of sacks of acrylic yarn, and we were like, "Oh yes, yarn," because we were out, right? We were quarantined and out of yarn. My God, right? The horror. Like, does it get much worse than that? Well, okay, yeah, it can get worse than that, but that's pretty serious. We all agree it's pretty serious, right? So yeah, so we were super stoked. So availability, it's a big thing. So when I say availability, let's also talk about what fibers you have, because you could just spin stuff, right? Well, yes, you can, but it does take a lot longer to spin than it does to buy yarn, right? So there's that. And Fern Monkey correctly says hand spinning is its own thing. Not all weavers are going to be spinners, and that is true. But if you're in a traditional setting in the Andes where there are lots and lots of spinners, you're going to have plenty of access to yarn that can be spun. The thing is, at really super high altitude, there is no season when it doesn't get down to the 40s and into the 30s Fahrenheit. So, near freezing or down to freezing overnight most nights. Because you're at high altitude, you're where there's permafrost and glaciers and stuff. You're just a little bit down from that. And in those settings, you don't really have a good time of year to shear your animals. So in that context, a lot of the time, you have a small flock of sheep potentially, or you have a probably larger flock of alpacas if you're up at high altitude. Well, okay, so I guess I'm at 9,393 feet here right now, so 93 feet, so most people would consider that high altitude. But here in the Andes, that's down in the valley, and that's why it's such a tropical paradise and all that kind of thing. So high altitude is where we're going to be going over the next couple of weeks, and you'll be able to see some videos from that if you're following along on the Patreon. And then later, after their early release, in a few months, they'll be out for general consumption on YouTube and so on. In the meantime, In the meantime, so what that means is you might get one or two fleeces, entire fleeces from a sheep a year, because you're also probably going to combine the process of harvesting the fleece with the process of harvesting the meat and skin and bone, shall we say, right? So you're going to eat a couple of sheep from your flock on an annual basis, and you're going to use their fiber too. But there probably isn't a really good time for them to be entirely shorn in the more conventional way that a lot of people in the English-speaking world are used to, or who live at closer to sea level are used to. Or who have barns that they can put their animals inside, and a lot of that kind of stuff. And you do want the meat, right? You do want to eat the meat and have some of that as well. I mean, let's just work with that assumption for the time being. The traditional Andean diet is largely vegetarian with occasional meat, and you're not gonna butcher a larger animal like a pig or a sheep or something like that unless you've got multiple families that are ready to eat pretty much all of it within a very short frame of time. Again, because you don't have refrigerators and a lot of room for preservation of that meat, so it's usually for larger meals and that kind of thing is when you're going to see, like larger events, like a big celebration like a wedding or something like a funeral, where you have really large gatherings of people and you need to feed all of them. For instance, feeding everybody who came to my mother's funeral was two sheep. Um, uh, uh, N. Gene Burns says no salting or smoking meat. There is salting and preserving meat that way, but uh, but but it's still it changes it a whole lot, right? So it does change the characteristics. So there is that, and in fact, charqui, which is the Quechua word for preserving meat, drying it in the sun, salt, is where the word jerky enters the English language, arriving there via the vector of British sailors buying charqui in the ports along the coast of Peru when sailing around in the Pacific. So that's an interesting little piece of trivia. And that is also going the other way. That is where Peruvian Spanish calls the sweater a chompa, which is a transliteration of jumper. So cultural interchange, it goes multiple ways. It's kind of interesting how that how that shakes out, I think. So there is that, but you don't have the same quantity. So you're much more likely to have a big thing where you eat most of the sheep and then you salt and dry parts of it, but only parts of it, not the whole of it. So a lot of the sheep wool, and again, that is stuff that comes on the scene after after the Spanish arrived, because sheep made their way around the world in general thanks to Spain. That was a major vector for sheep transiting from the old world to the new world and to Oceania. So Australia, New Zealand, all that kind of thing was via the Spanish Seaborne Empire, as they called it back in the day. On the Spanish Main, which was half the planet, conquered quite a lot. So anyway, so sheep they showed up here in the 1500s in Peru, in the Andes. And so they became a widely adopted crop flock and herd of animals here at that point in time, because they are very useful and they're, generally speaking, fairly low maintenance. And so then they adapted really well here. Before that, what you had for animal fibers in the Andes was camelids. So we're talking about the guanaco and its domestic offshoot that was bred from that, which is called the llama. Not as it is often pronounced by English speakers, the llama, but it's llama, basically, is how it is pronounced in the Andes by Quechua speakers. And you also had the alpaca, which was bred from the vicuña. For a long time, it was thought that the alpaca and the llama had both been bred from the wild guanaco, But about 20 to 30 years ago, DNA analysis proved that the alpaca was actually bred from the wild vicuña, and so it actually received a new scientific name. It changed from being Llama pacos to being Vicuña pacos, and so now we know that that is its ancestor. So those are the four main camelids in the Andean region, in the Andes, which is a whole large part of which is a whole large part of South America. And then in the more deserty and coastal type areas, you also had cotton, and you had cotton that was grown in lots and lots of different colors, very fine cotton. So Pima cotton, for example, is a modern crop that it was developed from the original New World cottons of South America. So those are the pre-Columbian fibers that you mainly see used. Mainly, there's also some maguey, some cactus fibers, some of that kind of stuff that is used, but it is mainly cotton and camelid. Those are mainly the pre-Columbian fibers that you see used. So those, so you don't have quite as much of those, right? Because you're shearing part of an alpaca fleece. Llama were mostly pack animals, still are mostly pack animals, which is to say that they're used for transporting cargo around the Inca Empire and related. And when I say that these were the animals that got used for transporting cargo, I'm going to flip around again. Very convenient to be able to do this. And you remember our tunupa up there, the face in the mountains. And if I stand up and walk just a little bit, you will see that next to him there are some structures, and those are granaries. That's where corn, mostly corn and haba beans and legumes and some potatoes were stored. And some of the reason for that is about this time of day, every day here in Ollantaytambo, tropical paradise though it may be, it is a tropical paradise where it is largely always going to be sweater weather at some point during the day and definitely at night. So the wind coming down the canyon that we're going to go up in some later episodes of Thrills and Chills at Abby's house, the wind coming down there would cool things off really steadily and also dry stuff, and so it functioned really well for preserving food and whatnot. But let's walk a little bit further around my courtyard here. You the path up to that, and I think you'll see that it's not the easiest thing to transit. So here we are walking through the laundry area. I know, right? But if you look over here, we're getting closer out into this neck of the woods. Do you see the path? Oh, you don't see the path? Really? Because I mean, it goes from those structures right there, right? I'm looking right at it. Yeah, it's a pretty treacherous path. So if you look like right in there, that's one sort of landing area, and it goes up around there. So you need some sure-footed animals, right? You need some sure-footed animals that are going to be happy walking around something like that. And that maybe is not necessarily all of them, but yeah, anyway, so llamas are very important as a pack animal. They're also really smart and defend themselves and potentially other animals from predators like the puma and potentially the condor, which is a large bird, a large predator bird, large raptor, big bird, giant vulture, 3-meter wingspan at the largest, so pretty big. They will carry off, lambs, immature animals, children. I mean, not commonly anymore because there aren't that many of them around because they're endangered and all that kind of thing. But, and we do see condor flying around these mountains sometimes. We haven't seen an awful lot in the past few months, though. Okay, so you don't have a ton of fiber available. So this contributes, when you think about it, this contributes to the desire to produce really long-wearing textiles. And so the traditional textiles of the Andes are very tightly spun. very tightly spun, and very tightly woven, so they will last 20 to 30 years as a garment, assuming, of course, that they don't fall prey to any pests, that you don't have any moths attack them, and other kinds of stuff like that. At the same time, at the same time as all of that, yeah, that's really labor intensive. So you need your textiles to last longer. So you put more into them, you make a higher quality textile and all that kind of thing. So what happens if you get to a point where now you want to sell some of your textiles too, right? Well, now you have the question of how much of your usable stuff that you need to survive in the form of having textile materials do you really want to sell, right? Like if you've only got enough to make one poncho, two ponchos a year, and that's got to last, 20 years for your spouse or your kids or something like that, how much of that do you really want to sell off? So even once you get to a point where you can buy commercial textiles, industrial world textiles and garments and clothes and that kind of thing, you still have a need for the traditional ritual use and significant event use textiles and that kind of thing. But maybe you're not going to be using them all the time. You're going to be storing them longer. What happens to textiles when they get stored? Well, that is a big point of failure for textile longevity, right? That's where pests come in. That's where other kinds of damage take place that you don't realize, and that kind of thing. And acrylics are not as susceptible to that. So they're cheap, they're widely available, they're extremely color fast. They come in a broad range of colors, and they really hold up well when you're leading a life with more variety in it, and you're not always wearing the same thing. Kay wants to know if the jacket that I got for my birthday is natural or synthetic. And the jacket that I got for my birthday is hand spun, naturally dyed, backstrap woven, fully traditional, all hand sewn, all everything. And it was a gift from the Weaving Association in Chinchero, which is the town where I grew up, and which has engaged in a lot of these textile preservation activities, fomented in large part by my parents. And so that's a really significant and really touching gift, because it is it's a textile that is traditionally made from all the traditional materials with but it's wearable. It dresses up and down, and it's wearable in sort of an industrialized setting as well. It's not only a pre-Columbian and traditional colonial era textile. It's also, textiles are a big identity thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we are getting into looking at Manuel's poncho. Why does Manuel have a bright red synthetic poncho? Well, here is what those textiles all look like. And I'll put up some, yes, and the cat persists, right? Anyway, so this is what a poncho from the district of Ollantaytambo, that's the town that we're in, which includes lots of other small communities, looks like. And so he has, this is an identity textile. He has to wear it for special occasions and major events, and for big dances and for that type of thing. And also it says who he is, right? It says where he's from and what he's all about. And his is interesting. I'm not sure who made this one. Marta, his wife, my BFF since ages and ages ago, did not make it. She's not a big weaver, and all that. But so we're looking at it. We've got a lot of these different things here, and so there's a lot of these really interesting motifs. But again, this works real well for something that you're going to use a few times a year. That is an identity textile and all of that kind of thing. Like I already, that my wonderful, beautiful jacket, I'm already, making sure that I take it out and take it outside and shake it off and inspect it on a monthly basis, because I don't want any pests to get anywhere near it. And they show up pretty fast, right? In modern households, especially. In older households, they didn't show up as much, because you would have a wood burning stove type solution, oven stove type thing inside the house, and that would keep a whole lot of smoke, and the smoke would keep down the insect population. I want to point out this guy here is Tupac Amaru, leader of the revolution. He and his whole entire family were tortured to death and as the revolution that he led did not succeed, although it later would succeed. And so there are a lot of really interesting things going on right there. And ya han venido. Buenas tardes, chicas. ¿Cómo están? We have Tatiana. Ven, por favor, pues. A ver, toma un asiento. So this is Tatiana, who works with me. And I said that we were all very happy about having some synthetic yarn show up. Estuvimos, ¿no es cierto?, muy feliz cuando Jocelyn nos ha traído lanas, ¿no es cierto? Sí. ¿Y por qué?
Porque queríamos tejer.
Because we wanted to knit, right? I mean, how obvious does that statement seem? I guess like pretty obvious, like on the face of it at that point. But yeah, I mean, we wanted to knit. ¿Y por qué queríamos tejer?
Para nuestros tiempos libres.
Eso, ¿no? Para
estar
y había bastante tiempo, bueno, más o menos libre durante la cuarentena. Yeah, so in quarantine we had a lot of uncommitted time and we wanted to keep our hands busy. Entonces, ¿tú desde cuándo has tejido? Since how long? When did you learn to knit? How long have you been a knitter?
Bueno, la primera vez que empecé a tejer fue cuando estaba embarazada para el bebé.
So she first started knitting when she was pregnant with her first baby. ¿Cuántos años tiene esa ahora?
Ahora tiene 14
años. So now that's a 14-year-old. So she's been knitting like 15 years. Sí. Y entonces empezaste para hacer ropa para
bebé.
To make baby clothes. Pero también porque querías tener algo para hacer con las manos o
Claro, quería estar ocupada.
Yeah, so you need something to keep your hands busy while you're pregnant and maybe you're not getting up to a whole lot of other things. And also because you need baby clothes and you can make baby clothes that you want. So knitting for your baby when you're pregnant is kind of a classic thing. ¿Y has tejido siempre así para tus hijos?
Sí, he tejido chompitas, suéteres, hasta cuando estaban pequeños, pero solo en los tiempos libres.
En los tiempos libres.
Y ahora en la cuarentena volví a retomar
sí, ¿no?
chales para el frío.
I see. Yeah, also it's been a chilly year and this is a pretty chilly winter, so yeah, so she's knit sweaters and jumpers and things like that for her kids all their lives. And then she, you know, was working real steady and not doing as much knitting, but then with quarantine it was time and it's been cold and so she made everybody scarves. ¿Y te gusta tejer?
Sí, me gusta tejer bastante.
Sí, bastante. ¿Y por qué?
Porque siempre me gusta estar ocupada.
Eso, ¿no?
Sí.
Es difícil pues responder a una pregunta como es ¿por qué tejes? Porque ya cuando aprendes te da la gana siempre, ¿no? So why do you knit? Do you like knitting? Why do you like it? And she's like, you know, because then I have stuff to do with my hands, and also who doesn't like knitted things, but also I have stuff to do with my hands. So I think that's pretty relatable. Entonces, ¿con qué lanas mayormente tejes?
Con lana sintética.
¿Lana sintética?
Sí.
So she uses a lot of synthetic yarn. ¿Y por qué?
Porque es lo que puedo encontrar aquí.
Because it's what you find available to buy. Entonces, ¿por qué no has aprendido a pushcar, así a hilar lana con la pushka o lo que sea?
Porque ya a nosotros ya no había esos tiempos para que nos enseñen.
Sí, ¿no?
Sí.
Y es difícil si vas a aprender así como adulto, es muy difícil, mucho más difícil. Sí, la mayoría de mis estudiantes del hilado son adultos,
claro.
Entonces por eso es muy interesante, ¿no? So she said, well, she was already a grown-up, so she didn't have the kind of time that it takes to learn to spin to be good at it. Normally you learn that when you're a kid. And also she could just go buy yarn. So, all right, so if we were going to get all yarn snob-like on Tatiana here, we'd be like, oh my God, but you should have been using like all these amazing fibers that you have around here, right? Or should we? Me personally, I'm like, get your hands in there and knit with what you got, right? Like you want to do something, right? Exactly. Bunny says, these are like, why do you like breathing questions? Y una señora me dice, esa pregunta, ¿y por qué te gusta tejer? Es como preguntar, ¿y por qué te gusta respirar? ¿No es cierto? Sí. Ya cuando sabes, ya cuando tienes la costumbre de hacerlo, es difícil dejar de hacer, ¿no es cierto? So I mean, like, I think she should be able to make baby clothes. I think she should be able to have a hand fidget. She should be able to do all that kind of stuff. And if they're selling synthetic yarn at the market, like, why wouldn't you buy it? Entonces, ¿por qué no te vas por qué no compras otras lanas más pitucas de otras fibras de alpaca, de lana de oveja? ¿Por qué no compras eso para tejer?
Porque no sé buscar.
¿Por qué no sabes buscar? Okay, so she doesn't spin because she doesn't know how. Bueno, yo te enseño mientras que estás
Claro.
trabajando aquí. Hay que aprender de todo, lastimablemente. Te van a decir de repente guaylaco un poquito, pero para una temporadita nomás. Después de eso ya estará bien. Yo te enseño bien. So I said I'll teach her how to spin yarn. So that's because it's her heritage, and it is other people from her culture originally who taught me when I was a little kid, and it was a different world. Tatiana is younger than me. She is in her early 30s. I am in my late 40s, and the world changed a lot here in that span of time, and so that's a lot of why she didn't learn to spin. Also, Ollantaytambo is a fancier, more highfalutin town than Chinchero, where I grew up, which was much more backwards. So there are multiple sort of generational things going on there. Pero venden así a las turistas también, venden así lanas de alpaca, todo eso, ¿no es cierto? Eso venden.
Claro,
¿Por qué no compras eso?
porque es muy costoso.
Es muy costoso, ¿no?
Sí.
Y entonces para una madeja, de que puedes hacer una chompa para un chico pequeño, para un chico de 6 años, digamos, ¿cuánto te cuesta en lana sintética?
En lana sintética, 30 soles.
30
quedan 6
soles.
madejas.
Yeah. So I said, so if you want to make a sweater for one of your kids, right? You know, let's say grade school age. Like how much does it cost? And she's like, well, let's say I need to buy 6 skeins. That's going to be like 30 soles. Y si quisieras hacer de alpaca, wow, ni se sabe, ¿no? Puede ser bastante. 30 soles is $8. So $8 or untold quantities, right? So somebody asked, one of the questions that got asked ahead of time is, where does this synthetic yarn come from? Well, Peru has a huge mill industry, and it exports when the borders aren't closed and there's no global pandemic. It exports a large quantity of yarn to the rest of the world from the mills that are mostly in Arequipa. Las fábricas así de los hilos mayormente están por Arequipa. Me han preguntado, ¿y de dónde vienen? So a lot of that stuff is export grade for foreign markets, right? And so it never even hits the local markets. So mill spun yarns that you can buy in the US, that you can buy in the industrialized world, they don't even hit the market here. Entonces, ¿has visto alguna vez en mercado madejas así de lana de alpaca como venden para turistas a veces? No, nunca.
No se
Yo
ve.
tampoco. Ni una vez he visto una madeja en un mercado típico. So neither of us has ever seen like skeins of nice, pretty alpaca mill spun knitting yarn in a market, like in a standard market. Bueno, en Cusco, por calle Pera, que de repente conoces que está cerca a San Pedro, pero más abajito.
Ya.
Pero ahí más abajito de San Pedro del mercado, por ahí hay
Una recta de lanas.
Sí, hay una recta de lanas, pero ahí donde hay ropas y hay centros comerciales, adentrito vas y ahí hay un centro comercial donde venden así varias cosas así, esas madejas de varias, de acrílico, pueden ser sintético y también de alpaca y lana de oveja. So there is this one place in Cusco that you can go now and you can buy some of that stuff. And it is mostly frequented by people who work like with knitting machines and make machine knit sweaters like this one that I'm wearing, which is pretty warm. And this is an alpaca and acrylic blend, which is nice because it's machine washable and dries really fast. So, but it still keeps you pretty warm. Entonces, también has visto de repente por Manzana Pata en Cusco, ¿conoces o no tanto? Es la zona de Jocelyn, ahí tiene ella una amiga que trabaja ahí. Jocelyn, my niece, has a friend who has a knitting machine and sewing machine store and business in Cusco. It's a classmate of hers, and so she sells knitting machines, teaches people how to use them, and she also will do machine knit sweaters and a lot of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of those industries also around Arequipa, which is the second largest city in Peru with a population of around 2 million people. There's a whole lot that goes on there. That's where this sweater is from. These These are very cheap. Like this is a 30 sol sweater, so like an $8 sweater. So very utilitarian things. So at the same time, you know, everybody likes to have stuff that they make by hand. Everybody likes to have stuff that's made for them in person. But generally speaking, oh wow, these are luxury fibers or fine milled knitting yarn things are hard to find. There are a couple of places in Cusco, in the city of Cusco, where you can go and you can buy some of that stuff and you can work with it. Pero generalmente, si quieres tejer, va a ser con sintética, ¿no?
Sí, lana sintética.
Porque eso es lo que hay.
Es lo que hay aquí
Sí.
y es más cómodo también para
Y
comprar.
bueno, y es mucho mucho más cómodo para comprar. Ya yo tengo una bolsita de lana de alpaca que he comprado yo en la tienda de la fábrica Mitchell, que trabajan con alpaca, que es muy costoso, ¿no? Y eso así, 1 kilo de eso me ha costado así, pero me han rebajado, me han dado un precio bonito porque he llevado pues mi grupo para que comprarían, me lo han rebajado y en 100 soles para
1 kilo.
1 kilo.
Wow.
So I spent 100 soles on a kilo, right?
Wow.
So that's 2.2 pounds. So that is, you know, $80, 75, $80, right? On a sweater lot of mill spun, really nice alpaca yarn. And that's like, wow. Entonces, y me van a querer preguntar, entonces, ¿y cómo eso sale? Ya, ¿cuánto es el sueldo mínimo en Perú que una persona debe ganar en un mes? How much should somebody make? What's minimum wage in Peru for a month?
El sueldo mínimo es en 850 soles.
850 soles. That's 850 soles is minimum wage for a month in Peru. So minimum wage for a month in Peru, 850 soles. And do you think you're going to be buying a lot of 100 sol batches of yarn to make a sweater if you're making in that range? Pero eso no es lo típico. Mayormente mucha gente ganan así 1,000 soles al mes, 2,000 soles, 2,500. Eso sería la clase más o menos mediana. Están ganando así que que eso es la entrada de la clase mediana, ¿no? Más o menos. So that's entry level middle class is sort of 1,000 to 2,500 soles a month, right? So that's comfortable. Y en ese caso también si tienes que pagar un alquiler, si tienes que mandar a tus hijos al colegio, a comprar comida. No te alcanza pues mucho para comprar lanas así en un precio así de esa manera, ¿no? So there's just not a lot of wiggle room in that kind of budget to be buying yarn that costs, you know, more than 5 soles a skein. There just isn't, right? And if you're working for a wage kind of lifestyle, you probably also don't have animals. Y también, si es que trabajas así para ganar un sueldo, tampoco estás en el campo con animales, todo eso, entonces tampoco vas a tener milma ni lana para hilar, ¿no es cierto? So you don't have animals that you're going to be getting your fibers from too, but maybe you still want to keep doing your yarn related crafts. So what are you going to do? Not use synthetic because it's uncool? Because it's low class? Yeah, I don't think so. And I think like the proof in that is like you should have seen the looks on all of our faces and the frenzy when my niece came back with all of this colorful synthetic yarn. We were like, hot damn, I'm making a scarf. Oh yeah. And I'm like, nah, I'm gonna make a traditional USA textile. So I've got a granny square Afghan on the hook, right? So yeah, so there's entonces todo eso, entonces, pero mejor trabajas pues con lana sintética si quieres tejer en vez de no poder tejer ni nada, ¿no es cierto?
Claro, es un proceso más largo, más costoso.
Sí.
Con 100 soles compraría para 3 suéteres.
Sí. Would you rather make 3 sweaters or 1 sweater if you have 100 soles, right? And you're a knitter, would you rather make 3 sweaters and have that much of your free time entertainment taken care of, or make 1 sweater? Tough call. Ya, y entonces si supongamos que vas a tejer algo para vender, digamos vas a hacer chalinas para vender a turistas. So let's say you're going to knit scarves to sell to tourists. Si eso vas a hacer, en ese caso, ¿qué lanas usarías?
Igual sintético porque es para empezar, ¿no?
Para
Para
empezar.
que vean
Sí, ¿no?
lo que se trabaja y luego se podría comprar de repente teniendo un dinero una lana más.
De repente, ¿no?
Claro.
Sí, porque, bueno, okay, pero también, so this is a tough one. So I said, what if you were making knitting scarves for sale? What would you use? And she says, well, I would definitely start with synthetic yarn because it's cheaper, right? It's a lower cost to begin. And so there's less material investment in making something for sale that you don't know exactly what it's going to be. So you're getting started and you have to figure out what you're going to produce to the market, what's going to sell, what's going to move, what isn't, and that kind of thing. And so you don't want to sink as much money into, you don't want to sink all of your money, all of your startup cash into inventory that is going to potentially move more slowly and at a higher price, right? And this is the same thing. This principle is true for any kind of business anywhere. You want to have the first few things that you're selling be going out the door rapidly, and then in the longer term, as you ramp up, then that's where you need a scope and a spectrum of different priced things that are gonna cost differently and move at different rates. But you always need that steady high turnover, high churn type of product. So then there too. Y eso, bueno, tampoco la gente que están comprando chalina, shawl, todo eso. ¿Acaso ellos son tejedores mayormente, no?
No.
Yeah, so they're
Ellos
mostly not,
compran.
they're not knitters, they're buyers, right? Entonces, ¿qué crees que les influencia a comprar, no? ¿Qué crees que les jala la atención para que vayan a comprar si es que no tejen? So if they're not knitters and they're just buyers, what do you think grabs them the most?
Porque es más fácil.
Porque es más fácil comprar, ¿no?
Comprar que hacer todo el trabajo y para el precio que vendes.
Pero y tampoco no respetan bien el trabajo que entra en hacer un textil, ¿no es cierto? And she says, well, people who don't do it, like it's easier for them just to buy it than to make it, and they don't know what goes into it, so they don't have any way of knowing, like, is this a fancy, hard to knit scarf, or was this easy? And they maybe aren't sophisticated judges of materials either, so, yeah, from a making stuff for sale perspective, starting out cheap makes a lot more sense because you're going to be moving stuff on a regular basis. Tatiana's job actually is that she cooks. Estoy diciendo que cocinas, que eso pues es tu trabajo más principal, ¿no? Entonces has trabajado cocinando en muchas maneras, en varios sitios, ¿no? Entonces, si vas a vender comida en la calle, es igual pensar en vender comida en la calle que pensar en tener un restaurante.
Igual.
¿Es igual o es diferente?
Es diferente.
Es diferente. So she says it's different to cook to sell food on the street and to have a restaurant. ¿Qué diferencias habrá? Bueno, es complicado, ¿no?
Sí, hay mucho.
Yo me supongo que si vas a vender en la calle puedes decir, hoy día voy a hacer antecuchos, digamos, o voy a hacer una cosa y hoy día eso voy a vender y vas vendiendo y todo lo que tienes y vendes. Pero si vas a tener un restaurante tienes que tener un menú, todo listado, preparado y listo y más diversificar lo que puede servir, ¿no?
Claro.
Entonces son negocios diferentes, pero en cada momento siempre tiene que haber algo que puedes vender rápido y algo que es más especial y los precios serán diferentes también, ¿no?
Claro.
Y eso se trataría un poco del precio de materiales y también de si es difícil de hacer o no, ¿no es cierto?
Claro.
Yeah. Pero hay más gente que cocinan, entonces saben más de lo que es preparar comida, me parece, ¿no? So selling food is different because most people cook, so they have some idea how much work goes into making a lot of things. So being able to price food differently is different from being able to price textiles differently. Entonces si alguien te daría lanas muy bonitas, pitucas para tejer, ¿eso habrías?
Claro.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. She'd knit with fancy yarn, right? Pero sería algo difícil para tomar la decisión que vas a comprar algo muy costoso, ¿no?
Claro, sí,
Yeah.
sí, sí.
But it's a stretch to decide to go out and buy some really expensive yarn. Like, who's going to turn down absolutely gorgeous and stunning yarn, right? So one of the things I want to do and that I want to see happen here is give a lot more of these folks who are very capable knitters around here a chance to work with fancier fibers for themselves not only for sale for the tourist market, right? Um, because there are some groups and organizations that will give people higher end yarns to produce knitted goods and crocheted goods that are for market, and then they're getting paid for their labor and all that kind of thing. But I think it would be fun to diversify the market of what's available. I think that I mean it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. Like if there are good mill spun yarns available in Peru, if there are good mill spun yarns available in Peru, but they never hit the market, and the big reason they don't hit the market is because people don't have a good reason to buy them, and it's a tough call to spend, 1/8 of your monthly minimum wage on the amount of yarn for a sweater, as opposed to, you know, a third that money on yarn for a sweater. Well, then that's a very different thing. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these yarns that are made in Peru never hit the market in Peru or the market for regular people because they're made here, but they go straight from the mill to being shipped overseas, and a lot of that kind of stuff. So that's one thing, right? And a lot of the time, people who are knitters, who are tourists, who come to Peru, are hoping that they're going to be able to go find a lot of these products in stores, find these amazing yarns, and not so much. And one of the other things I really want to do once we open up from quarantine is go do some traveling to mills. Y no sé si te gustaría traernos algunas cositas
Sí,
que has tejido que nos
sí,
puedes mostrar. Eso
está
sería
bien.
lindo. Tatiana's going to bring us some stuff she's knitted to take a look at. So I think it would be a lot of fun to go to Arequipa, where the mills are, tour some of them, take people who are spinners and weavers who don't usually get to go do that, and give them a chance to tour some of those mills and talk about some of those things. And I think it would be fun to develop some yarn lines and to do some more of that kind of stuff. But yes, there's this real split between the mills that are producing for the exterior market, for the foreign market, and what's being made and distributed for sale in Peru, and a lot of that is price. And yeah. And Fern Monkey says spouse had a friend from Tanzania who said exactly the same thing about the coffee, right? That there was all this amazingly good Tanzanian coffee being grown for export, but in Tanzania, the only thing they could get is like the crappy sort of mass-produced stuff that it seems like. And so supply chains and how they work and what the logistics are on all that stuff is also a factor. And now what's interesting right now with the global pandemic is that you're seeing a lot of these companies that have produced goods expressly for export not be able to access those export markets while borders are closed. So that means that we're seeing a lot of businesses that have catered to foreign markets alone start to revamp and retool and think about what they need to do in order to be able to produce things for sale within Peru and to Peruvian markets. And then that's going on at the same time. And it's going on at the same time as everybody's broke because there's no work. So that's really interesting. So that's part of what my whole operation is all about too, is trying to find ways to keep independent people sustaining the work that they're doing, so they don't all have to sell their tourist operations to Marriott and leave nobody here dealing with that kind of stuff, except for big corporate foreign operations and that kind of thing. So, all right, so there are a few things. So cost and the time that it takes and what kind of quantity of it you can get, and whether you're making things for market and whether there are pests. We've talked a little bit about how textiles are used, where like if you're going to be putting on your poncho for traditional use a few times a year, then you're not, and you're going to be storing it a lot of the time, then you don't necessarily want this to be something that is going to be risky for you to bring out. So here Tatiana's going to show us a couple of the things that she's knit.
Esta es la chompa de
La
Max.
Chompa de Max. And so this is really impressive, and I'll put some pictures of it up on the Patreon. But so she did this by looking. She doesn't think of herself as a particularly sophisticated knitter, but this is a one piece knitted on two straights, but in the round, with a cowl neck, dog sweater with raglan sleeves, and again she knitted it all in one piece, and it's really adorable. But she didn't have the gauge she had to knit it at is a little bit loose and all that. So yeah, so anyway, so the dog sweater, Anyway, yeah, this is impressive. So again, Tatiana does not think she is a super accomplished knitter. She thinks she is average. So you're going to tell me that this lady should not have whatever yarn she wants and should not knit because all she can get is whatever, right? Like, I don't have a lot of patience for that. So then she was just looking around on the internet and she found a stitch she liked, and from looking at pictures, she worked this out and she knit this sweater. And right, she should get whatever yarn she wants, right? Todos están diciendo, wow, de eso. Ella, bueno, esa Tatiana pues merece cualquier lana que podemos conseguir para ella, ¿no? Eso. So yeah, so she figured this stitch out from looking at some pictures of it, and it's a very smooshy and squishy thing. And so she is not unlike a lot of knitters here, where she doesn't tend to work a lot from patterns because there hasn't been a steady pattern publishing industry and a lot of that kind of thing. But you know, she did figure out how to make this very springy, remarkable thing. Everyone liked it, so now she's got to make everybody's scarves from it. And oh wow. So she's got this other ribbing one, sort of a ribbed textured scarf, really nice, that she's working on here. Just to have something to do. This is ¿y cuántos pares de palitos para tejer tienes?
Dos.
She has 2 pairs of knitting needles, and this is one of them. So who wants to tell me how many pairs of knitting needles they have living in the States? Crickets. Chirp, chirp. But yeah, let's take another look at the dog sweater. ¿De qué tamaño son esos palitos? 8. They are size 8, she says. So yeah. So do you know how to do in the round on 2 straight needles with 2 raglan sleeves that are set in, and then a cowl neck that was going to be a hood, but then he didn't really like the hood, so she made it a cowl neck instead. I don't know how to improvise that. And a lot of people say I'm a reasonably accomplished knitter, but so she just did it, you know. And then she was like, oh, you know what? I should put in some cables too. And she actually, ¿y dónde empezaste?
Por el cuello.
¿Por el cuello?
Por aquí.
Por aquí.
Empecé el cuello, separar las manguitas.
Empezaste con el cuello.
Sí, por el cuello, por aquí.
Ajá.
Esto ya es después.
Yeah.
Se teje hasta aquí,
Hasta
separa
aquí.
las manguitas
Sí, se
y
separa.
luego se continúa el cuerpito.
Ah, ya, entonces hiciste las manguitas uno por uno primero y después empezaste en aquí o...
No, hice el cuerpo
Ajá.
primero, estas estaban separadas.
Ah, ya, entonces lo has reservado
Sí,
nomás.
las reservé los
Ajá.
puntos, separando. Hice el cuello, las manguitas y al final aumenté el cuellito.
Ah, ya. So she started up here y haciéndolo redondo.
Claro, en redondo.
Yeah, so in the round on those needles, en esos palitos, on those needles. So in the round on those needles, right? And then she did the increases and separations for the sleeve part and set those aside. ¿Y cómo lo has reservado?
Esto cuando se cuenta los puntitos,
Mm-hmm.
se saca con una lanita, se separa.
She just stuck some yarn in there to hold those stitches in reserve. Y después tejiste todo el cuerpito, lo demás. So then she knit the rest of it in the round, and so she got to this part, and she's like, oh, ¿y esta cadenita has puesto porque llegaste ahí para ser interesante? Or?
Claro, para que se vea bonito.
Yeah, so that it would look pretty, and so that she didn't get bored, she threw in these little cables. ¿Y no has usado otra agujita, algo así para hacer las cadenitas?
No, es con el mismo tejido.
Yeah, no, she just did that with her fingers, right? She didn't the cable needle. Y después regresaste.
Terminé todo y regresé.
So then she
tomé
finished
todos
all
los
of that.
puntos y
And then she picked
empecé
up.
a tejer.
She picked back up here and she did the sleeves in the round. Y de ahí.
Tomé los puntos otra vez del cuello y
Then she gathered her, provisional cast-on, presumably type stitches here, and she knit what was going to be a hood. But after trying it on the dog, because she's holding this up to the dog, right? While she's doing this, trying it on, she's like, oh nope, not quite right. Oh, yep, that's about where the sleeve needs to end. So, y lo has hecho así midiendo con el pero mismo.
Sí, porque tenía que encajar a su cuerpo pequeñito.
See, so right, it had to fit him. It had to fit him. So she had to, try a lot of different things. So I mean, like from my perspective, this is some pretty technical knitting, right? Like, and she did this with a skein of yarn that she found at the market, and she did it to keep herself from going nuts in quarantine. So, and like I say, she's not thought of. She doesn't think of herself, and nobody else particularly looks at her as if she is like a super competent, like, holy shit, that's amazing knitter. But she certainly would be anywhere in the developed world. Todas están, wow, ni puedo creer, wow, tan proficiente, mira qué experta, pues, como teje esta señora que puede hacer todo eso así nomás, ¿no? Y, y, y esta señora dice que chompas para perros son muy difíciles si es que tienes un patrón y un diseño y agujas circulares y pitucas y todo eso. Entonces, wow,
Solo
eres
lo
una
hice con eso.
campeona y no pueden creer así, wow, con eso nomás,
Sí,
¿no es cierto?
son 40 puntos.
Sí,
Para la espaldita se separa 10.
sí.
Para los bracitos es cada lado es 5, 5.
¿Y cómo sabías?
10.
¿Cómo sabías que eso funcionaría?
Porque como le dije yo desde que estaba embarazada,
Sí.
tenía que tejer una ropita para un bebé recién nacido.
Ajá.
Entonces probaba los puntos para ver qué tamaño iba
Ah.
a salir.
She says she learned all the math on this. She says it's 40 stitches total, and that this is standard for a sweater for most mammal type creatures, right? That it's 40 stitches total, and that you've got and then you've got your raglan increases out there. So you've got 20 for the front, 20 for the back, and then there at the shoulder part you've got like similar proportions that are going to come in. She says she figured that out by trial and error when she was pregnant, trying to knit different sweaters for her son to be. Yep. Yep. Meanwhile, I'm working on. Meanwhile, my niece is working on her first sweater for herself, and she asked me to help, and so she's doing a bottom-up raglan cardigan with a little bit of waist shaping, and she asked me to figure this out and do the calculations for her and figure out how to make it for her measurements and all that. And I was like, all right, yep, I can do that. And it's really basic, but everyone's like, well, of course you can do that, right? Like, of course you just know how to do that. And I was trying to sell her on the idea of learning to work from a pattern, and everybody was like, nah, you don't, nah. Entonces, y tú, si alguien te preguntaría, dirías, sí, pues yo soy muy experta en tejer chompas. I asked if somebody asked her if she's an expert sweater knitter, and she's like,
Sí, viendo puedo tejer si me piden algo.
She says, well, I mean, if you show me something and ask me to do it, I probably can. Right? Yeah. So, all right. So let me cut to the chase on this. I teach a lot in the United States and in the developed world at high-end, fancy yarn and fiber arts events. And there are plenty of times that I've been sitting at an event like that, watching everybody knitting and hanging out and often saying things like, hey, I'm with my tribe, which is one of those things that we can have a whole nother set of discussions about. And really feeling the camaraderie of being there with knitters. And this will be like at a really fancy hotel someplace. And all the knitters will be taken over the lobby, and then there'll be people running around who are hotel maids and who are serving drinks and food and cleaning up after people, and they'll be looking at what's going on there. And a lot of the time, those are folks who've come from Spanish-speaking countries, and so I am lucky enough to be able to have conversations with them where I see somebody looking at what's going on and looking at it, and I can talk to them about stuff. And they're knitters who are just as accomplished as Tatiana is, and they're excluded from hanging out in that crowd of people in that setting by a number of different things. They probably even speak enough English to be working in that hotel and all that kind of thing, and they've probably worked really hard to get there to the US, for instance, to have a job as a hotel maid doing all this kind of thing. And then there they are being a hotel maid while a fiber show is going on, and they don't get to participate in the marketplace because it's really expensive. They don't get to participate in the camaraderie of hanging around with the knitters who are there because there may be language barriers. And even more to the point, because they're going to say, well, all I've done is make a few synthetic baby sweaters. And this is one of the things that really gets to me when we get into talking about like yarn snobbery and whether or not acrylic yarns and fancy yarns are okay, is look who among our peers around the world as knitters were leaving out entirely. Like somebody like Tatiana. Les estoy contando y explicando que yo muchas veces, y hemos hablado de esto creo, muchas veces estoy enseñando clases en un hotel muy bonito en los Estados Unidos y ahí hay señoritas que han trabajado fuerte así para llegar allá, que están trabajando así de limpieza en ese hotel o lo que sea, pero igual como tú puedes, están tejiendo así cosas para sus hijos, para sus bebés, y ahí están viendo a esa gente que están haciendo su reunión en el lobby, en el bar, en lo que sea, así con sus cócteles, con madejas de lanas que cuestan $20 a la madeja, 30, 40, $50 por madeja, 20, 30, 40, $50 skeins, right? Con pares con agujas y palitos que cuestan $300 para un juego de 4. ¡Wow! ¿No? Eso. Y entonces ahí ves, ahí imagina pues que serías tú, esa chica que está trabajando ahí de limpieza, que puedes tejer así como todo esto, y estás viendo estas gringas que tienen tanta plata y tantas cosas, y había un mercadito que han hecho y en esa feria y todos están ahí tejiendo, y tú tienes así estas chompas que has hecho, pero ahí están esa gente y entiendes inglés y dicen, ay, pero es solamente tejido con lana sintética. ¿Te va a dar la gana de conversar con esas chicas?
No.
No. So I said, so, you know, what happens if, you know, you're there, right? You're there, Tatiana, and you can do all this kind of stuff, and you see all these folks, and you understand enough English, and you know what they're looking at, and you can have a conversation with them, and you can show somebody how to make this dog sweater, right? How to make this amazing dog sweater, and show them how you figured this stuff out. But you walk up and you're thinking about having that conversation and somebody says, ugh, that's acrylic, to something that somebody is using. You're going to kind of maybe not be so interested in hanging that scene. And so this is a little bit, this is, you know, apart from the question of accessibility from the perspective of Yelly Knit saying yesterday, oh my God, I can't spend $400 on the yarn for this sweater, right? There's also this other whole judgment factor thing, because, okay, people have different amounts of money and there are different economic situations all around the world, and stuff is different, right? Like I have an 8-person household and we get by on the about $1,400 a month that I generate from my Patreon right now. That's what we're getting by on in this whole pandemic thing. I mean, normally I have other revenue streams and we do a lot of other stuff, but that's what we're getting by on right now. So we don't have the budget for, you know, a lot of the high-end fancy yarns that are out there and that kind of thing. And we're still who all we are, right? But there's no harm, no foul, right? Like different people have different economic situations. I was a millionaire, technically speaking, working in tech in Silicon Valley once upon a time. I'm not anymore, you know. So I'm not saying nothing should cost what it costs. I'm not saying that it's unfair to price things at a fair wage for the people who make it or at market rate for the materials that are in it. What I am saying is that there's this other whole undercurrent, other whole layer to it, right? Which is where to some extent, yeah, like people might be happy to see Tatiana like refilling their glasses of water, or someone who looks like her bringing them new towels at the fancy hotel at a fiber event. But it doesn't occur to people necessarily to think that they're peers, right? That we're all peers, that we can all sit down together and interact together about our love of doing things with our hands and the fibers that we want to work with. Y eso estoy explicando pues que en tantas situaciones sería posible que hay gente que podrían tener intereses compartidas, pero que no pueden mezclar por problemas de la clase social, ¿no es cierto? Que piensan que hay gente que tienen así como pasatiempo, que tejen, que tienen el interés y que sí, que pueden comprar lanas buenas, materiales, utensilios buenos, todo eso, pero ni tienen el rato en que pueden pensar de que sería interesante sentarse contigo para ver, wow, ¿y cómo hiciste esto? Y wow, y de todo eso. So one of the things that it's been my tremendous opportunity to learn throughout the course of my life is that a lot of the time when you're looking at fiber arts type questions, knitting, crochet, sewing, spinning, weaving, all of that kind of thing, you don't even have to have words in common. You just need to be like, look at this, you can show and you can do these things. ¿No es cierto? Si alguien te muestra algo y está tejiendo a palitos, puedes ver lo que están
Claro,
haciendo, ¿no? Y
sí,
ni es necesario que conversas a veces,
claro.
sino para compartir y de todo eso. Right. So what happens is when we're looking at, $400 in yarn for a sweater, it's not that that's an unfair price for the yarn. It's not that it's unfair that the designer displayed it in absolutely gorgeous yarn. It's not that it's unfair or unreasonable for it's not that it's unfair or unreasonable for those fair prices, which are even on the low side, to be charged by doing all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, it's a bummer if you're on the downside of that. And a couple of people just right there said, okay, and so here's where the snobbery between wheel spinners and spindle spinners and crochet and knitting and fancy equipment and not. And yeah, and a lot of that is why I quit my job in Silicon Valley Tech and started teaching people how to make string with a stick, right? Because I grew up here where people were making things from absolutely nothing with very what we would call limited or low cost tools and equipment, and the skill set is astonishing and astounding, right? So yeah, so here we come to a couple of different things, right? Like, now, it's a bummer when wide availability of synthetic fibers and synthetic yarns means that people stop doing higher end, higher skill, but lower volume of available materials type work, right? So it's a bummer if people stop spinning and people don't know how to spin anymore and they can't keep doing that. It's a bummer if people don't know how to do their traditional techniques because they're doing other things instead, because there's more of a market for that and there's no market or use for the traditional things. And so you want to nip that in the bud. But at the same time, you don't want to tell people, oh, well, this fantastic poncho here is just a bunch of crap because it's synthetic, right? You don't, because it's not creamy because it's synthetic. It's just synthetic, and there are reasons why it might be, right? So for me, what I want to do in the fiber arts and with sustainable tourism and with all of this kind of stuff is I want to bridge all these gaps, right? And I want everybody to have the chance to realize that we're peers, right? That we all have that same fundamental thing where we're like, oh my God, I'm in quarantine and I'm out of yarn. How am I going to survive this, right? And because don't tell me that you don't, that if you had run out of yarn in quarantine, you wouldn't have like taken whatever somebody handed you, right? And all that kind of stuff. So there's a ton of really interesting questions that get tied up in all of that, and so it's really tough. And so Kay points out that there was a designer about a decade ago who showed her patterns in both really high end yarn and in a lower cost yarn like from Knit Picks or whatever, and yeah, and that's great. And I think like it would be really cool to find everywhere that's possible. ¿Tienes frío? Está un poco frío, ¿no? Ay, no. Eso sí. Yeah, it's starting to get cold. It gets cold here pretty quickly. The sun starts to go down. Después de esto vamos a probar un cafecito. So we're gonna have coffee and tea and stuff after this. But yeah, so like it's great to be able to do that, and it does mean that you have to have one more sample knitter knit one more sample, and that's prohibitive. And a couple of people have brought up, and they've really been on the mark bringing this up, talking about it on Twitter and on Instagram, about everything that came out of what Yelly Knits was saying yesterday on Instagram about economically inaccessible patterns, right? With economically inaccessible yarn. That, well, yarn substitution is different from pattern design, and that's true. And that it would be great if you could always showcase your pattern in lots of different yarns. And that's also true, but it's prohibitive. And I think that the expectations that people have from designers are like, whoa, it's crazy. And one of the big reasons why that is the case is because in the English speaking world, patterns became something that people relied on really heavily, right? So you take a knitter like Tatiana, who is able to knit by looking at an object and then recreating it. And she doesn't need patterns the same way that a lot of people in the industrialized world do. And that dependence was manufactured by the fact that yarn companies became the people who paid for patterns because the theory was that patterns drove yarn sales. And so for a really long time in the English speaking world, what you had was you never had a pattern that wasn't published with specific yarn requirements and for specific yarns, because the yarn company actually paid whoever wrote that pattern, whoever documented it, and all that kind of thing. So it's really interesting to think about. And that didn't start to shake up. That didn't start to shake up, in my experience in the U.S., in a big way until Ravelry came on the scene, at which point they started to make they started to be able to see the yarn substitutions that people had done, right? And be able to see stuff knitted in lots of different ways. And then that created a desire for people to be able to do those yarn substitutions, which again used to be relatively commonplace as household skill sets. But again, these were things that didn't get documented and written down a lot. So now you've got the situation where in the industrialized world, you have a leisure class of people who pursue these skills, where there are people who are not from a leisure class who possess those skills to a tremendous degree. And so now, there are all these structures in there that exist to make that continue to be the case. And it's really hard to think about what are the things that every one of us as an individual can do to kind of counteract that and to take stands against that, right? So, like, what are some things that we can do in lots of different cases? One of the things I can do is, because I do have access to other kinds of yarn a lot of the time, and because it's not always a global pandemic in which I just can't get fancy ass yarn, is I can give Tatiana fancier yarn. I can sit down and we can cross the language barrier, and we can talk about how did she figure this stuff out. We can do video classes and how she figures this kind of thing out. We can have back and forth in conversations and where we have these peer interactions that aren't necessarily possible in other circumstances. And the thing is, if you look around your life, you've almost certainly got situations that are like that. And there's almost certainly some situation where you've got where you're holding higher up on the stick. You've got a better end of the deal than somebody else. If you can find ways to bridge that gap and it starts there, then like that's really spectacular. And I'm going to say that in the yarn world, where those things come in is questions of class and money and questions of race and culture, right? So find ways to sit down with the people who are your yarn loving peers that are right there in your community, but who maybe are not in the same social strata or cultural group that you're in, and you'll be like blown away what kind of things you can pass by. So this speaks right to one of the questions about that someone asked about: how do we get past defenses of lower cost and broadly accessible materials being kind of patronizing and condescending, right? So like how do you so Doreen says that she's found a few ways to get past that sort of patronizing and condescending way of talking about, these poor people who, she says she's been able to emphasize the history of materials or combined materials in her work, but it doesn't really pick away more broadly at the idea that, oh man, these poor unfortunate souls who can only afford acrylic, and isn't it a shame that they can't have better and fancier stuff? Well, I'm going to say the first thing we have to do is look at our own selves in terms of all of this kind of thing, right? Because a lot of the time it's within us, right? Like, we covet that like fancy cashmere lace yarn, but are we really going to bag on someone who made it out of cheap cotton? Or not? And in some cases, people are going to, and then that means those of us who are maybe more flexible in our thinking, owe it to ourselves and the rest of our community to be like, lay off maybe with the yarn snob thing a little bit. and from all that. There are a couple of other questions that came in that I really, some really big, we're already running pretty long. And so I think we're going to have to do some more live streams talking more about some of these specific things. And we'll talk about some of that kind of stuff and schedules for those coming up. But one of the questions that people asked me a couple of times, a couple of different ways, is if money were no object and availability were no object, is it that people want to be working with acrylic, or would they rather be using higher end? Would they rather be using wool? Would they rather be using these other kinds of things? And that is a really tough question, right? Because the answer is it depends, and that's the answer to almost all the fiber questions that are out there, right? It depends. Casi no hay pregunta que se trata de materiales que no es, bueno, depende, ¿no es cierto? Pero, ¿qué piensas? Si es que no sería, si es que no habrá cuestión de precio, de nada, ¿con qué materiales quisieras trabajar más?
Si es que sería igual todo.
Sí.
Bueno.
Si es que dinero no entraba.
Claro, con lo que tenemos en nuestras comunidades que para darles a conocer parte de nuestra cultura.
So yeah, so here's the question that here's the answer you probably didn't see coming, right? And this is part of why I love it here so much, right? And she says, I want to work with the stuff that we've got. I want to work with alpaca, and I want to work with our high altitude camelids and the things that are from here and our native fibers that I want the world to know how badass they are, right? I want everyone to see that's what I would work with, no question, all other things being equal. That's what she would work with, right? But but yeah, Kay says, and I agree with this, I will make washcloths out of $1 cotton even if I become filthy rich. Same, right? And you know what? When I did live in $1 million house in Silicon Valley and have a tech job and all of that kind of thing, I made washcloths out of that cheap cotton because they were good washcloths, they got the job done, and it was what I needed it to be. Pero ya, entonces, si vas a hacer una chompa para Max, ¿lo harías de alpaca? No? ¿Por qué no? So I said, if you're going to make a dog sweater, you're going to make it out of fancy alpaca? And she said, no. Why not?
El problema es para conseguirlo aquí.
Bueno, pero si lo tendrías.
Claro, si lo tendrías, sí.
¿Lo harías de alpaca?
Claro.
Una chompita para el perro?
Claro, porque la idea es tejer, porque te gusta.
Well, she says, well, sure, I might, money's no object. Who cares if it lasts, how it holds up, who has to take care of it or anything like that? Sure, I might, just because it would be nice to knit with, right? Pero, ¿crees que le serviría?
Él no diferenciaría si es alpaca o sintético.
Él no va a saber. Well, the dog's not going to know. ¿Y para cuidar?
Para cuidar no lo va a cuidar.
Just take care of it. The hell, I'm taking care of it. I made the dog sweater. I'll make another one. Sí, ¿no? Pero si lo tienes que cuidar. De repente no será de la alpaca más fina, ¿no?
Claro.
Yeah, right. Y entonces yo podría hacer pues chompas de cualquier material,
claro.
pero aquí tengo esta chompa que estoy usando que es de alpacril, que es alpaca con acrílico. Claro. ¿Y por qué? ¿Por qué crees? So I said, well, why do I, who could probably have whatever I want, because I can spin it, I can blend it, I can make it, I can dye it, right? Why am I wearing this marketplace, tourist-grade, cheap alpaca acrylic blend sweater?
Porque tiene los dos.
Bueno, porque lo he comprado en 30 soles y estoy muy feliz de eso. No me ha costado mucho, está bonito, me queda bien, me calienta bien. No me importa si machine hang it up on the line to dry. I don't care if I spill something on it. It's rugged, it fits me well, and it cost me 30 soles in the marketplace. So, eso es bueno, ¿no? Now next up, I think we need to talk about like labor and fast fashion at some point somewhere in all of this, because when you've made your clothes, you care more about them also, and if they last, and also they fit, and there's also all this other kind of stuff, right? So yeah. So, I mean, do I want to necessarily be known as, oh yeah, that chick in the cheap alpaca acrylic blend sweater? No. So if this is an identity textile, again, different kind of things. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different. There's so much there, right? So there's so much here to unpack. There's so much here to unpack, and the last thing we're going to touch on just a little bit is the question of fair trade and markets and supply chains and how they work, right? And so that kind of comes down to, well, so in your opinion, is fair trade, the way people in the U.S. think about it, really fair? Is it really a thing? Like, is it the most sustainable thing ever? Have we been lied to about the idea that artisan collectives and stuff are providing a real benefit to the people who are making stuff in places like Peru or Uruguay or lots of other countries? And the answer is no, but it's complicated, right? Because you can have a collective that really benefits the people who are working in it, and you can have one that benefits the middleman, and you can have one where it's complicated, where there's benefit to both sets of people and other sets of people. So that's a really tricky question. Like, I think you have to look at each one of those things as an individual type of thing. I don't think that it's simple and straightforward, and that certification always means things are really great. So, like, let's talk fair trade coffee. You have to have a big enough operation to be able to qualify for fair trade certification and get that kind of rubber stamping of all of that kind of thing. And it's really tricky, right? Like, it's really tricky. So you have to be a big enough operation to be able to qualify for those programs, which means your mom and pop farm that has, an acre of coffee plants in the backyard isn't going to be able to get in on a program like that necessarily. So they may be doing really good sustainability work in their community, and the same holds true for some of the associations, or they may not. So it's much, much trickier, right? So so it's really tricky. And then there's the question of, is this what people want, right? And then this is coming up. This is coming up a whole lot when we look at what's happening in Ollantaytambo right now. Estoy explicando que en Ollantaytambo, que es un pueblo que mayormente aquí vivimos todos de turismo, ahora que no hay turismo, cómo estamos viviendo. Y hay mucha gente que están buscando así manera de hacer sus negocios sostenibles por expandir sus relaciones que sirven a los ollantinos también, ¿no es cierto? Que no es todo turístico. So the businesses that are kind of hanging in, that are, now we're 4 months into this pandemic, 5 months into this however long it is, a million years into this horrible pandemic, and we haven't seen tourists who bring us the bulk of our revenues in however long. And today is the first day that we might be able to see some national tourists from elsewhere in Peru, and everybody's like, hold up, don't be bringing us COVID, stay home, we don't need you to... Interesados la mayoría de la gente que conocemos aquí dentro de Ollanta. ¿Por qué? Porque hemos estado más o menos seguros que no había COVID, y ahora ya está apareciendo. So we're starting to see COVID outbreaks. And that's because people are transiting around the country now, whereas they were not before. And so now people can come and do tourist things, and everyone's like, I don't know, right? I don't know if I'm going to open my restaurant. Si tú tendrías restaurante, ¿abrirías ahorita para servir a todos los turistas que vienen?
No,
¿No?
porque es un riesgo.
Es un riesgo.
Sí.
Y teniendo niños. So I asked Tatiana if she's got a restaurant to open. If she has a restaurant to open, would she open it right now to serve the tourist market? She said no hesitation, because it's risky, right? So that's all tricky too. But so everybody who is surviving, who's getting by, has found ways to diversify what they're doing so that it isn't only serving a tourist market, so that it also serves a local market. And I think that this is part of what sustainability means longer term, right? And a lot of what has produced these economies where people make something in one area and then export it is the inequity between pay scales in the industrialized world and the world that has yet to industrialize to that degree, right? Because if I tell you that, $300 minimum wage for a month to live in Peru, and that you can live on that fairly reasonably, right? Like I said, I'm supporting a family of 8 people on $1,400, which, it's tight considering how many different things we're doing and trying to keep going and everything, but we can. There's nowhere in the U.S. that I could do that, right? there's nowhere in the U.S. that I could support myself and continue to do, yarn related work or whatever on that kind of money. So anyway, when you're exploiting or capitalizing on or taking advantage of or working with, however we want to look at it, the imbalance in wages, the economic imbalance between a low cost of living place where you manufacture goods and a high cost of living place, a higher place where you sell them, then that only lasts so long, right? Like that's not a forever and sustainable thing. So what does become sustainable is where you're producing things, paying people a fair wage that allows them to buy the things that they aren't spending their labor time on doing, and that's basically never been tried in the post-mercantilist capitalist world. So what we're starting to see is little pockets of that happening in places in the course of this pandemic, and I think that like as people who do stuff with our hands, we're the ones who should be out here trying to find ways to make that be the hip new thing and the cool thing to do moving forward, right? Disrupt the capitalist mega economy or whatever, crazy thing we're going to say along those lines. But we're talking about, so like the comment about yarns that are made in a factory that gives people jobs. Well, can those people afford to buy the yarn that was made in it? And then there was the Henry Ford comment, which, there's a lot problematic with Henry Ford, but one of the objectives that he had was that everybody who worked in his factories would be able to buy his product. And that is one type of capitalist ideal, and there's a whole lot in this. And where I think this is really important is because when it comes to yarn, that is where everybody sort of beta tests their idea for these economic shifts and changes and stuff. And so that's a lot of what I hope will come out of all of this crazy pandemic stuff, and out of spreading around the love of making textiles and working with yarn by hand, which is something we all share. Because like, who doesn't want to sit down with Tatiana and make this dog sweater? Like, y dentro de la cocina no entra bien señal, entonces no podemos conversar. So our inside the kitchen, which has one wall that is old Inca wall, and then the other walls are big, thick, like almost a meter thick adobe and stone. We don't have good Wi-Fi or cell signal. So we can't go live in there, and then the sun's going down soon. It's going to start getting cold. But I'm looking at doing more of these sort of discussion-based live streams, and then having, what I'd like to do is to be able to do like a live stream where, I lecture and talk and do a bunch of this stuff, and it's just me babbling and talking to everybody around the house and all that kind of thing. And then after that, maybe some Zoom sessions and catching up. And so I'm piloting a lot of these kind of things with folks who are on the Patreon. And a lot of that is just because then we're working with people who we know are going to be coming back the same time again and again, and we're able to do it consistently and all of that kind of stuff. So this has been really a whole lot of fun to be able to do this more broadly and to a bigger audience. So share this around, spread the word and everything. And for everybody on the Patreon who sent in questions and who is kicking in a few bucks every month to keep us all going and able to work through and think through more of this stuff, thank you so much. You're really who makes this all possible, and we're able to talk about making stands against economic injustice or all these kind of things, because you folks have dug deep into your pockets and found a couple of bucks to throw our way and keep us in coffee and dog sweater materials. But yeah, is that dog sweater not like seriously impressive? And I mean, for real, and yeah. So another fun one that I'd like to do is I'd like to just go out with my phone camera at some point and film everybody who I run into who is doing yarn stuff like out on the street and say, hey, I notice you're crocheting a bag. Can we chat on camera and go from there? Doesn't that sound like fun? Marta. So I will show you also that moved from the poncho. Esta que salió y justo en ahí pues se echa pues ahí donde vamos a estar. So yeah, so again, I'll be posting some more close-ups of this fantastic textile. And like I say, we are going, Marta.
Un gato.
Sí, un gato, ahí está el gato. Sí, teníamos pues el gato al lado del gato.
Ujú.
Eso, ¿no?
Un picaflor.
Picaflor, yeah, so we've got hummingbird.
Ajá. Después debe ser esto una paloma
Una paloma o es cóndor?
o cóndor será.
The dove or a condor, we're not 100%.
Es una iglesia o un cóndor o un barco.
Iglesia, creo.
Creo que es iglesia, ¿no?
Porque tiene sus cruces.
Ajá.
So that's a church. Tupac Amaru.
¿Llama o perro? ¿Cuál será?
Será llama, creo, ¿no?
¿No es cierto?
Sí. So yeah,
Esto es llama.
este es llama.
Este.
Este es llama. Y este,
Gato
gato.
o jugando con pelota.
O jugando con pelota. So it might be a dog play. No, es gato, porque mira, pues su cola. ¿Acaso los perros tienen
Mira,
cola así como eso?
El gato, mira, pues.
Ay, sí que está. Yeah, so no, this one's a cat because of having whiskers over here.
Y ese
So
perro.
this one doesn't have the same kind
Jugando
of
con
whiskers, so
pelota,
that's a
pienso.
dog with a ball. So yeah, people work these through and make all of this, and so we're gonna be talking to some more weavers, showing some more pictures about all this kind of stuff, and Marta and Manuel and I have like all these big dreams, big ideas about all the sustainable tourism activities and interchange of information and all that kind of stuff that we want to do. And so much of it is just that so many people come here to do tourism and they're taking away. They are so many people come here to do tourism and they want to see the things that they already know they're supposed to see. They want to see what they expect to see. And at no point do the people who live here, whose culture this is, whose world this is, get to say, hold up. Your tour guide from someplace else just told you that you're looking at XYZ, but I live here and here's what you're really seeing. And like that's particularly tough in Ollantaytambo because we all live here in the middle of this amazing archaeological site, and people walk through it doing tourism, and it's like they don't stop to think that they're walking through people's day-to-day lives, right? And so like imagine you're going to the supermarket and somebody walks through from someplace else with a group of tourists and says, and here the standard American goes about her business purchasing toilet paper for ritual use, and you're like, I'm buying it to wipe my ass, right? You know, and then they're all like snapping pictures, and you're like, that's kind of awkward. Now they just saw what kind of tampons I put in the cart, right? So like imagine it's like that. So what would you say to those people to be like, hey, be respectful, hey, learn about stuff? What would you rather people think about your day-to-day life? And so there's it's sort of a fantasy ever since we were kids that we would get to like actually tell people the truth and show them the real deal and give people whose world this actually is a chance to say, hold up, here's what I want you to know. It's like when we asked Tatiana what materials would she work with, all things being equal, she's like, oh man, the ones that are ours, that are local, that everyone should know about. Yeah, think about that. All right, so yeah, it's starting to get cold, so I'm gonna pick up and pack things up, and we're all gonna go have a cup of tea and call it a night. And keep your eyes peeled on the Patreon, and we will be talking a lot more about a lot more things that we're gonna do. And probably once in a while we'll do these live and for the general public things. And then the more detailed and in-depth stuff and with direct question asking and so forth are going to be for folks who are subscribers first, and then available to the general public after those have been up for a while. Again, thanks so much for coming and joining us, and have a great Wednesday. Is this Wednesday? Is miércoles?
Hoy día es miércoles.
Miércoles, yeah.
Wednesday.
I think it's Wednesday. That's así es cuarentena, no se sabe. That's
No
quarantine.
sabemos. Estamos
¿Cuál día
perdidos
sería?
con el día.
Puede ser viernes, no sabemos. Could be Friday, we wouldn't know. Domingo. No creo que será domingo.
No.
Supiéramos, no, porque habrá misa. We'd probably know. It's a Catholic country. We'd probably know if it was Sunday. Other than that, yeah. Other than that, thanks everyone for coming. And one more cat shot on the way out. And bye-bye.
Michi, michi. Ya está.
Yeah, she's dubious. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.